All right, let's say our blessing for learning Torah together. La'asuk b'divrei Torah. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvah v'b'tzivah la'asuk b'divrei Torah. Praise to you, Lord our God, rule of the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. All right. Alan, would you read Ashamnu on 1 foot, please?
Sure. Ashamnu on 1 foot. Ashamnu is an alphabetical confession of communal transgressions that we say during the Yom Kippur Amidah. Sometimes it's called the Vidui. Some people recite it right before they die and or before they go to sleep, just in case. We hit our hearts for each word. The prayer first appeared in the Siddur of Rav Amram Gaon in the 9th century of the Common Era.
Thank you. All right, questions at this point about Ashamnu? Some of them I might answer now, some of them I might say that we'll get to, but what questions are out there at this point?
Why did Rav Amram Gaon put it in his Siddur in the first place?
So my guess is that he put it in the Siddur because his Siddur was a very long answer to the question from Spain, from the Jewish community of Spain, of what prayers are we supposed to say? Originally, they were asking about something, I believe in the Talmud, that says that you should say 100 blessings every day. And so the question was, okay, well, what blessings are we supposed to say? So they sent that to Rav Amram Gaon in, I believe, Baghdad, and he wrote back a super long answer, which became the first prayer book. And since he was answering not only the blessings, but like all the other prayers that you might need during the year, he decided to stick this in because he couldn't easily just type off another email and shoot it off a minute later.
Well, this is being recited before the Siddur was actually, before it was actually placed in writing.
Correct.
Did the prayer originate specifically in the Babylonian Jewish community, or was some version of it existent in other places? Like, did he basically compose this himself, or was this like a regional tradition in his area?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. We'll see the full evolution when we get there, but in short, to answer your question, it was just in its standardized form, it developed in Babylonia.
Okay.
And by being included in the first Siddur, which you can find a copy of in the Jewish Theological Seminary's rare books room in their library, the prayer gained much wider transmission and acceptance across the Jewish world.
I see.
David, is it kind of unique to Jewish liturgy that a lot of the words in the confessional are in plural, it's communal? Because I know, like, other religions, when they do confession, it tends to be in the first person. And I'm just curious if that's kind of a Jewish value, you think, that we confess communally.
I believe so, to the best of my knowledge.
David, is this is it the same? Is a prayer the same for Sephardi and Ashkenazi text?
The words are the same because they predate the Ashkenazi Sephardi split. So the words are standardized. The tune is different. The tune that we think of as, quote, the tune for Ashamnu is an Ashkenazi tune.
And why is it sometimes called vidui? Because my understanding was that the vidui prayers is something that you say before you die.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So vidui means confession, and that includes Ashamnu, that includes al-Chet, which is a longer alphabetical listing of transgressions. There, I believe that there is a different version of the vidui of the confession that is available for people who are dying if they don't seem to have the strength to make it through all of Ashamnu. But so vidui is a larger term, and Ashamnu is the specific term for this prayer that begins with the word Ashamnu. It's sort of like all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. All Ashamnus are viduis, but not all viduis are Ashamnus.
Thank you.
Yeah. Other questions at this point?
Why is it on 1 foot?
Good question. So there's a story in the Babylonian Talmud that a man came to Shammai and said, I will convert to Judaism if you teach me the entire Torah while I'm standing on 1 foot. And as some of you know, some of you don't know the story, so I'll finish it. Shammai said, you're making fun of us. The Torah is like quite lengthy. Go away. And he chased him away with his building tool because he was a builder by trade. And the man went to Hillel and said, again, I'll convert to Judaism if you teach me the entire Torah while I stand on 1 foot. And Hillel said, okay. So the guy stood on 1 foot, and Hillel said, what you don't want to be done to you, don't do to anybody else. The rest is commentary. Now go and study. The man puts down his foot, and he became Jewish, and he went and studied for many years.
Good.
So the phrase on 1 foot has become a Jewish version of saying in a nutshell.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and thus I try to start all of my source sheets now with giving the on 1 foot explanation so that we are all on the same page as to what it is that we're talking about.
Do we know it all?
Do we know it all now? Nope. Now it's the go and study part. All right. Don, would you read Ashamnu in English, please? Starting with we have trespassed.
We have trespassed against God and man. We have betrayed God and man. We have stolen. We have slandered. We have caused others to sin. We have caused others to commit sins for which they are called wicked. We have sinned with malicious intent. We have forcibly taken others' possessions, even though we paid for them. We have added falsehood upon falsehood. We have joined with evil individuals or groups. We have given harmful advice. We have deceived. We have mocked. We've rebelled against God and his Torah. We have caused God to be angry with us. We have turned away from God's Torah. We have sinned deliberately. We have been negligent in our performance of the commandments. We have caused our friends grief. We have been stiff-necked, refusing to admit that our suffering is caused by our own sins. We have committed sins for which we are called rasha, raising a hand to hit someone. We have committed sins which are the result of moral corruption. We have committed sins which the Torah refers to as abominations. We have gone astray. We have led others astray.
Thank you. And now here's a second translation. If you would read that, please.
We abuse, we betray, we are cruel, we destroy, we embitter, we falsify, we gossip, we hate, we insult, we jeer, we kill, we lie, we mock, we neglect, we oppress, we pervert, we quarrel, we rebel, we steal, we transgress, we are unkind, we are violent, we are wicked, we are xenophobic, we yearn to do evil, and we are zealous for bad causes. This is the prayer Ashamnu, so called because the first word is Ashamnu.
Thank you. All right. Before we get to the questions, Alba, would you sing this, please, for us?
Yes. Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi, Hevinu, Irshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu Sheker, da Yatsnura Gizavnu Latsnu Maradnu Niatsnu Sararnu Avinu Pashanu Tsararnu Kishinu Horef Rashanu Shichatnu Tiavnu Ta'inu Titanu.
Thank you.
You can hear me hitting my chest as I sing each word.
Yes. Thank you. All right. So here's our first question. Why might we be saying our transgressions out loud instead of just thinking them?
Well, that was kind of the question that I raised about, why we do it. So I'll take a stab at this. Maybe it validates it more when you say it in front of the community rather than just saying it to yourself. It lends more weight.
I think I can think of two possible reasons. One is that if you say them out loud, you might remind somebody of something they have done wrong that they didn't recall. And secondly, because we say it out loud, somebody might realize that we're actually apologizing to what we've done to them. What I like to talk after the class, perhaps, what I like to talk to you about is the word sin with regard to all this. But not right now, it would take up too much time.
All right.
Is it that God can hear it then?
It says in Deuteronomy that God knows our secrets. So we read that 2 weeks ago in Nitzavim. So maybe about God hearing it, and may also be about us hearing it.
I think it could give people like catharsis, almost like lancing a boil when you keep something inside, especially any type of guilt or remorse. When you keep it inside your own mind, you don't get the same type of relief as you do when you say something out loud, even if no one hears it. Sometimes it takes the saying out loud to really realize what's happened to you and what you've done.
Piggybacking off of that, maybe the point is to light a fire under you, so to speak. It's the holiest day of the year. You are fasting for your sins, so maybe the combination of that context with this is supposed to sort of be a catalyst for repentance itself. This could be sort of like a jumping off point for the people involved, that being the whole congregation, to meditate on what they have done, what they need, and what they need to repent of. So maybe it could have sort of like kind of like a practical purpose of like reminding you, but also a sort of an inspirational purpose in that sense. By just having it sort of in your face, in front of you, you're kind of forced to confront it you can't like run away from it really, especially if you're in the service it's presented here before you. So that, at least maybe that's what I thought the purpose could be. I'm not sure.
Well, it kind of validates that we're all human and we all make mistakes and we can all repent together, because these are all behaviors that any one or other of us could commit or do, and we share humanity or community when we say it together.
Yeah, I think there's a certain amount of that about sharing, because I don't think anyone, at least in the congregation we belong to, would be guilty of every one of these sins that's in this list. But, you know, you're almost doing it on behalf of others. I mean, I think it's very empowering, to be honest with
you. Okay. Next question. Why might it be in alphabetical order?
To remember it without a prayer book.
To remove any sense of priority, like which is worse, because it's an alphabetical order, you know? Like they're all equal. I mean, people might argue that, you know, like mocking is not as severe as killing somebody, but yet maybe in God's eyes, these are all of equal weight, possibly.
Since it isn't alphabetical order, it's not really a translation of the Hebrew. Because if the Hebrew alphabet in alphabetical order would not translate to the English in alphabetical order.
Correct.
That's a good point about the translation, because I know in Reform Maksurs that I don't know if they still use them. It's been a number of decades since I've attended the Reform for the high holidays, but they do a version after you do this of the acrostic, the ABC, but they do the positive ones, you know, like C is compassion and D is dignity, and you know, and they're all positive, they're all very positive adjectives and so forth, not the or verbs, not the negative ones in the list. So again, there's a lot of this opens things up, I think, to a lot of interpretation and a lot of discretion. I mean, if they could go to that route, because you're right, this is not a translation, not Aleph Bet Gimel. It's not like Ashrei or Chadodi or something like that, where it's true to the Hebrew in that order.
All right. Each of the alphabetical words ends in nu, here meaning we. If each person is saying this, why might the words end in we?
Saying it for the community rather than for us individually.
Because each person is part of the whole, and we are responsible for one another, and we take care of one another. So it just reminds us of what it's like to be a Jew in the community.
We are atoning for the entire community. If, for example, some person were unable to attend service and do it for himself, doing it for him as part of the community.
If we were to say I instead of we, for many people, there are many of these that you would say, I didn't do them. Why am I saying this? And by saying we, you're saying, well, maybe I didn't, but somebody else in this room or somebody else in our community did. And, you know, we're saying it on behalf of everybody, as opposed to, you know, getting into an individual argument over whether I, as a person, did one or more of these things or didn't do.
It adds emphasis, I believe.
Just looked in on you. That's it. It also shows a contrast between the Jewish way of confessing and the Christian way of confessing. One person in the Christian that goes into a confessional and uses the I term and talks to a priest. And we don't do that here. We are different from Christians. We have a different way of confessing. We confess as a group, as a community, not as individuals going into a booth.
David, these words that you put in, are these words you put in, or are these words you actually took to translate? Abuse, betray, cruel, destroy, fault, blah, 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 blah.
I didn't come up with them.
Okay.
They are someone else's.
Okay, because I'm questioning like xenophobic. I don't think they used that word back in the day.
They didn't use xenophobic, but the Torah does say multiple times, "You shall love the stranger because you were strangers in the land of Egypt." Like, it knows about xenophobia, it just doesn't have a word for it.
It just struck me as kind of odd.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe you were just grasping for an X.
Sometimes the X in this list is we are extreme, but xenophobic seemed even better because it actually starts with X.
Because it actually starts with it, right? Yeah. Okay.
You think Greeks for that?
But actually, isn't the second translation more correct because it's more universal rather than the first one? Like, there's more things I can relate to as a general rule than I can on the first one, the one I'm more used to. Or maybe because I'm so simple, I like one word instead of a whole bunch. I don't know.
It's true that the first list, the literal translation of the Hebrew, sometimes takes more work to think about, have I done this? Whereas the second list, it's easier to think through it. Why might we hit our hearts for each alphabetical word?
Well, I mean, it's a physical act. I mean, we're confessing, so that's a moral act and whatever, but hitting ourselves, that's a physical act and it's symbolic. So it's, like putting your money where your mouth is. And plus, in the daily Amidah during the week, don't we do that for one of the blessings? Yeah, so I'm saying that might, kind of be to be consistent with that as well.
Yeah, what Donna's referring to is in the third blessing after the Kedusha, we say, "Forgive us, God, Sachanu Adonai ki chatanu," because we have sinned. And on the word sinned, we hit our heart. Mechal avinu ki fashanu. And then another way of saying basically the same thing in anfashanu, which is another word similar to transgressed, we hit our hearts again. I don't know which came first, the hitting of the heart for Ashamnu or the hitting of the heart for the weekday Amidah, but it does seem like these actions are in conversation with each other.
I seem to recall some stories that in ancient times it was prevalent that they would whip themselves, use a lash of some kind, prayer. And is it that possible this is taking the place of that?
Yes.
And we also do things more dramatically on the high holy days. I can think of Aleinu. I mean, most of the year we do a simple bow, but on the high holy days we, go down to the ground. So I mean, again, maybe we do mild beating daily, and then we do this more intensely because of Yom Kippur. So there's this drama in all of this stuff. I think.
David, could we go back for a sec to, I think it was what Herb said about that this replaced self-flagellation?
Yeah, so
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know that self-flagellation was a Jewish custom, but it is possible that the custom of hitting your hearts developed in a milieu where others were doing self-flagellation.
Okay.
Even taking this idea back further, in this Bible, we have the story that I like to dub the showdown at Mount Carmel, where it's Elijah versus the 450 priests of Baal during the reign of King Ahab or Ahab. And in that story, Elijah challenges the priests of Baal to get their God to light a fire, or to accept a sacrifice, basically. And they get to go first. And all morning they call on their God, and he doesn't answer. And Elijah taunts them a little bit and is like, speak louder. Maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe he's on a trip. You should, try harder. And they end up cutting themselves to try to draw the attention of their God to their prayers. And then after a few hours of this, Elijah's like, okay, it's not working. It's my turn. And Elijah prays to God, and God sends out lightning, which puts the whole altar on fire, which is even more dramatic because he's already dumped a couple of buckets of water on it, and yet the fire still lights. And so everybody's like, God, the Lord is God, Adonai Hu HaElohim, which is actually what we say at the end of Yom Kippur. We sing it 7 times right around when we blow the shofar and we say the Shema. It's in that last section. And that's a quote from this story of the Israelites recognizing that our God is the one that they should be praying to. And so we've replaced the priests of Baal and their gashing themselves with some hitting of our hearts.
Could it also be to emphasize the importance of it? Like an exclamation point at the end.
All possible answers.
Related to,
go ahead.
Related to I guess maybe the thing about gashing in historical context. The surah this is found in is from the 8th century or 9th century CE, right?
Yeah.
So if I remember correctly, that's after the Karaites and their establishment began. I remember reading somewhere that they had some very radical sort of heretical interpretations of basically ways to deal with things for the fall of the temple, things like that. And also some of them thought you could do things like fasting on the Sabbath and things like that. I wonder if, because I know that the Karaites were also in Babylonia at the same time, I wonder if maybe there's some kind of liturgical competition going on between both groups, maybe? Because I know they interacted with each other, both the sages in Babylon and the Karaite scholars probably did. I don't know if that has any connection.
It's entirely possible.
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised. I don't know exactly what it was if it affected Ashamnu.
Because we have specifically in reference to the beating of like the chest for all of the offenses. That's what I was thinking.
That would make sense. That would certainly make sense as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good connection. All right, next question. Translators walk a balancing line. The first translation gets at the literal meaning of the words. The second translation gets at the general idea, but preserves the alphabetical nature. Do you have a preference between the versions? We can see a bit of each of them now.
I think in Hebrew, the second is easier to say.
The second is easier, but I'm thinking the first one, in my mind, is more authentic. I mean, the second one is almost like a little bit gimmicky with the alphabet. Because we even admitted, like, some of the choice of the language there is, might be a slightly bit contrived to go along with the acrostic.
But the second one maintains kind of the rhythm and the spirit. The one word in the Hebrew, which has to become two words in English because of, the word we. But it just feels more like the Hebrew.
The first one, the things we have done wrong are rather vague. Torah refers to as abominations. We have gone astray. Yeah. The second one, I think, is more specific as to the actions that we did wrong.
I felt like I could see myself doing more things in the second version than in the first version. I was like, that's not me. Although I saw myself more in the second than in the first.
It seems like the second version is like a Cliff Notes version of it.
It's funny.
All right, going to move on to our next section. Carol Flank, would you read a positive vidui, which I'll tell you now in the Hebrew is alphabetical and again ends with nu.
We have loved, we have blessed, we have grown, we have spoken positively. We have raised up, we have shown compassion, we have acted enthusiastically. We've been empathetic. We have cultivated truth. We have given good advice. We have respected. We have learned. We have forgiven. We have comforted. We've been creative. We have stirred. We've been spiritual activists. And we've been just. We have longed for Israel. We've been merciful. We have given full effort. We have supported. We have contributed. We have repaired. And the context is Rabbi Avi Weiss is a major figure on the left end of Orthodox Judaism. Among other things, he founded Shivat Hovrei Torah in 1999. This is his take on an accompanying text for the traditional Ashamnu. What is your reaction to the idea of reciting the things that we did right as a community alongside the things we did wrong?
We still thump our chest?
Yeah, it gives you some hope.
We still beat our heart when we say these.
Yeah. Maybe we pat ourselves on the back instead of thumping our chest.
Yeah.
I like it. I really like it, but I can't believe that an Orthodox rabbi came up with this because, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen this in the Reform prayer book. And so you're right, he'd have to be very left in that movement. This is great.
At ourselves on the back, we might need a wet noodle to bring with us.
But isn't this against the point of the day, that we're supposed to be atoning for the things we have done, not saying, yeah, it could have been worse?
No, but it's a new beginning also. It's a new year. So yes, we admit the things that we've done wrong, but then we look forward to being better.
And I think the synagogue, the congregation that do this, I may be wrong, don't do this with every Vidui through all the services. They probably do it in Elah, towards the end of the day when we've kind of spent ourselves in all this confession, I think. So that might, kind of temper it a little bit.
It occurred to me that it's a little bit like, if you've been in counseling and you confess the things that you're working on that you're not doing so good, but you don't want to go out thinking you're a completely awful person. So the counselor helps you realize that, you do have some strengths, and now let's make these even better. Rely on those and move on from the awful stuff you're doing.
That's good, Carol. I like that.
Brenda, would you read the evolution of Ashamnu, please?
Pardon me. According to the Torah, Leviticus 5:5 and Numbers 5:7, you should verbally confess what one does wrong. By the time of the Mishnah, the custom developed that not only should the high priest make confession on everybody's behalf, Numbers 6:2, but each person should verbally confess one's wrongdoings the afternoon right before Yom Kippur, so that one went into Yom Kippur with a clean slate. Koshefta Yoma 4:13. From there, the custom evolved to confess one's wrongdoings during the 5 Amidas on Yom Kippur, both in the personal prayer and then in the communal repetition. Arvit, Shacharit, Musaf, Mincha, and there was no standard text in the time of the Gemara, 75-7, during the time of the Goanim, 589 to 1038. Two versions of the confession solidified, both alphabetical acrostics. One was longer and was known as Al-Chet, and the other was shorter and became Ashamnu. The one borrowed from Daniel 9:5. By the time of the Matsport Bidri, 1340, we had basically the same text from Ashamnu that we use today. Why is the tune cheering?
Thank you. Yes, that's the next section. I should have shown that. It's not a good question for that. All right, questions about how Ashamnu evolved?
So is one supposed to do it on Erev Yom Kippur too?
Yeah. So originally you were supposed to do it on Erev Yom Kippur before you had your meal prior to the fasting beginning. I don't know if that is still the case, but I would guess that a Machzor would say it is. Would indicate. I'll look it up and put in the follow-up email.
What I find interesting is that the high priest made confession on everybody's behalf in the community, but each person, according to the Torah, should verbally confess one's own wrongdoings. namely saying I, not we. That's evolved so that we all now do it for the community. Do we have any idea of when that change actually might have taken place?
So,
what's a proper answer if you don't?
I don't know that it has actually taken, that the change has actually taken place. I think that what the Torah says about you should personally admit guilt, admit when you did wrong, still holds true. It's just that in our liturgy, we have moved to a standardized listing, probably so that in case you forgot something, it's covered. Each person still has to do their own work of their own issues. It's like saying that, yes, I need to clean my room, but then I need to go in and personally do my own room cleaning. Like I need to put away the stuff. So on the one hand, liturgically it's evolved. And that liturgical evolution happened sometime in the last 1500 years. But the fact that each person needs to admit when they did wrong still holds true. So it's a yes and, as they say in the improv world.
David, is there a custom? I thought I had heard that on the afternoon prior to Yom Kippur, you're supposed to give some kind of act of charity. Is that kind of inspired by this, would you say, or an illustration of this?
It's probably connected to it. This idea of I have done wrong, and here I'm going to attempt to make it right a little bit. One of these verses, I believe the one in Numbers, says that when you've done wrong, then you need to try to make it right plus a little bit extra. So the giving of charity is probably connected to that, making it right plus a little extra.
Thank you.
Somehow I always thought that the Yom Kippur appeal, if you want, as I grew up knowing what it was, that basically was in giving charity that you promised during Yisker. And that fulfilled that Yisker giving, because all the Yisker say gives charity for.
That makes sense. It's probably that the Yom Kippur appeal is probably does connect to that. Even if some synagogues have moved it up to Kol Nidre because more people are there to the Kol Nidre service. All right, recognizing the time, I'm going to now walk us through what is left in here. So, why is the tune cheery? And by cheery, I mean, it sounds, if you speed it up a little bit, it's like, Ashamnu, Baganu, Gazanu, Dibarnu Dofi. Doesn't really seem to match the mood. So it's considered a Sinai tune, which is one so old that it is as if it came down with Moses and Mount Sinai, even though in reality these tunes are from the 1100s to the 1400s in the German Rhineland. Because it is so old, it predates minor music, which dates to the 1500s. So that is why the tune is a little cheerier than it might otherwise, you might think it would be. Some people have sought to explain it as we are feeling good about the fact that we are admitting and conquering our misdeeds. Another way to think about it. Why is it alphabetical? So a couple of different possibilities. You guys named a bunch of them. One thing that I don't know that came up already was the idea that if you have something for all the letters of the alphabet, then it's as if everything is covered because you're being comprehensive. And also, as was mentioned, being alphabetical makes it easier to remember, particularly at a time before the printing press when all written copies of text had to be done by hand and thus were rare and expensive. Hitting our hearts, here's a verse from the commentary on the book of Ecclesiastes about everything is in your hearts, and that's why we pound our hearts. There's a verse from Song of Songs about my heart awakens, it is my beloved knocking on it, God knocking on our hearts to get us to repent. And a third explanation about it showing how truly repentant we are. Okay, all the words ending with new, we did this, a couple of different responses to that, which you'll be able to read at a slower pace when I send this to you. Most of it focuses on the fact that we are guilty because we didn't stop the individual from doing it. Which is not to say that all of your explanations are not also right. Again, the idea of all Jews are responsible for each other. When you're part of a community, the whole community rejoices with you, shares your grief with you, messes up with you. That's a reminder of that. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel quote, in a free society, some are guilty, but all are responsible. Pirkei Avot, if I'm not for myself, will be for me, but if I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? And how that might relate to this. Forgiveness and reconciliation, according to the Mishnah, Yom Kippur can only atone for mistakes between you and God, but for mistakes between you and someone else, Yom Kippur does babkas until you have gotten the other person to forgive you. And according to Maimonides, the way you do that is you say that you did wrong, hence Ashamnu. You resolve sincerely to act differently. If you're in the same situation, you make a different choice, and then you seek forgiveness from whomever you have hurt, and you have to do that 3 times. And after that, if they still won't forgive you, then that's their problem. And another thought about this is that when you let somebody bug you, you're letting them live in your head rent-free. Here's some thoughts about should you have a critical parent and this idea of Ashamnu and like God telling us that we did wrong and admitting your own mistakes, if that happens to be particularly challenging for you. Here are some thoughts about that you can peruse later. And then we have some musical versions of Ashamnu. We have the one that we already heard. We have a kids version from Eliana Light called Tap Your Heart. We have a choral version, which is a variation on the traditional tune. Ashamnu, Pagadnu, Kazalnu, Dibarnu Dofi. Here's the traditional tune, but with guitar and more harmony. Here is a totally reworked version, playing off the traditional tune. And here's a Sephardic version. And then here's one that I can't tell if the person wrote it or if it comes from somewhere else in the Jewish world. Finally, we have some appendices. We have a reflection on each word, things to think about with each word. Feel free to print this off and take it into shul with you. We have a contemporary take with new words that we might have done wrong in alphabetical order. Incidentally, I'm guessing these are based off of the Hebrew translations. So they're supposed to be in alphabetical order, or the sound of the Hebrew letters. We have an environmental Ashamnu. Again, looking at each word and how we might have transgressed in an environmental fashion. Jeez. And finally, that word, Bagadnu, we have betrayed, beged is not only betrayal, but it's also clothing. And so here is an article or a set of thoughts about how clothing might function as betrayal.
That was a lot, Dave.